to you by FASNY Youth in the Fire Service from the Nassau County Fire Service Academy. The first one today will be extrication. We ask you to please join in on the other ones. The other one's February 10th. It's a Wednesday at 7 p.m. You'll get your notifications. But please take advantage of these trainings during these times. So we ask you to stay tuned, stay safe, and watch the training. Thank you.
Good morning, junior firefighters and directors. I'm Chief Robert Noonan. We welcome you all to the Nassau County Fire Service Academy. Really excited to have two of our best extrication instructors here today, Chief Eric Becker and Chief Steve Simsack. We'll get you to them in short order. Just a little reminder to everybody, if you do have questions, I'm going to be behind the camera monitoring that chat function. Don't be afraid to type something into that chat function. For the most part, though, we're going to keep you muted. If we have something good, I might ask you to pop on, but we ask you to use that chat. And without further ado, let's get right to our class, and let's meet Chief Becker and Simsack.
Morning. Good morning. The first thing we want to address is the proper personal protective equipment that you will need to respond to an auto extrication call. It varies from fire department to fire department. Some fire departments have extrication jumpsuits, fire retardant, much like you see in NASCAR pit crew. Other fire departments require full structural firefighting gear. Today, for demonstration purposes, we're using a modified full firefighting turnout gear, just utilizing the jacket, gloves, safety glasses, and helmet. So as you respond to the scene, size up we know starts with the phone call. As we're approaching the scene, we want to look for hazards, down wires, car fires, gasoline spills, etc. When we park our apparatus, we want to establish a safety zone to keep the firefighters and other responders safe. We will angle the apparatus off in case a car does intrude into our safety zone. As we approach the vehicle, the first thing we want to do is instruct the motorist. Identify yourself as a firefighter. Firefighter Simpson, Northborough Fire Department. Please turn your car off, put the car in park. One of the hazards we should look for as we walk up to the car is the car still running. Is the car in reverse? Look at the white lights. You do not want to be between the emergency response apparatus and the car, because if the person takes that foot off the brake, the car's in reverse, and they get out of the car, you could have serious injuries being trapped between the response apparatus and the car. So now that we have identified and put the car into a safe mode, it's in gear, the car is off. Now we want to go ahead and stabilize the vehicle. So Chief Becker is going to demonstrate proper stabilization. We have a choice. We have two 4x4 pieces of cribbing. The easiest way to stabilize the car is place a chock in front and back of a tire. It does not matter which tire. You notice it cannot move from this location. So we want to do that on every car. Although the car is in park, there's a possibility from the accident the transmission could have been damaged and the car could start rolling free on you, endangering other responders. Next, we want to talk about making the vehicle safe, and we want to gain access to the car. We want to go ahead and get a firefighter inside the car, EMS personnel. There's two types of glass that you will find on this car. Going back to what you learned in basic firefighting, try before you pry. So we want to check to see if the doors are open or unlocked. I cannot open this door. I check all the doors, just like you 360 a building, we 360 a car. So we cannot go ahead and gain entry. So next thing we want to talk about is how we're going to gain entry. And we're going to go ahead and take out one of the windows so we can put a firefighter EMS personnel inside the vehicle to stabilize their personnel, or stabilize the driver and occupants. There is several types of glass you will find on cars. The glass on the front of the car is laminated safety glass, but we're going to talk about the side windows. Most side windows are tempered safety glass. Tempered means when the glass breaks, it will shatter into thousands of little pieces, this way reducing the chance of lacerations. We should make sure when we go ahead and break the side window, we want to go ahead, turn away from it. Chief Becker's going to demonstrate using a window punch. It's spring loaded. You would turn away from the car. Now, if we're having problems, and again, with the lamination, you can see this car does have lamination. So we can go ahead and take a striking tool, and we can go ahead, if we're going to use a striking tool, do not take a halogen and wind up. Remember, just like using an axe, short little chops. So we're going to take a flick of the wrist and take out the glass. If you notice how all the glass is shattered into thousands of pieces, we want to go ahead and clear out the opening, just like if we're doing ventilation on a house. We're going to go ahead and gain entry. And we always break the window furthest from the driver. Now our simulated EMS personnel are inside the car. Next, we need to go ahead and make the car safe. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect the battery. We're going to skip the disconnecting of the battery. It has already been made safe by our personnel that has staged the car for us. But we will force open the hood of the car and remove the negative battery. Before we do that, the negative cable, before we do that, make sure all doors, power doors are unlocked and windows are down. We remove the negative, and the reason we disconnect or de-energize the vehicle is because of the airbags. The airbags are found in multiple locations. Originally, the airbag was just on the driver's side. Then it went to the passenger side. Then it continued on, and we had side impact airbags. Now we also have rear occupant airbags. So we have to be concerned, and how you identify that, you can look at the dashboards and the various pieces of vehicle inside. The trim will identify where the airbags are. You never want to have your body in front of the airbag. Always work parallel to the airbag in case it does discharge. So,
Chief Simsek, I'm going to stop you for a quick second. We have a question from Brandon. If there was people in the back seat or in the middle, how would you bring EMS personnel in to help the person?
Good question, Brandon. Thank you for that question. We would go ahead and go to the rear of the car and come through the rear hatch, or if this was just a trunk, a typical sedan, we would come through the rear window. So this window has already been taken out, is made safe for our previous demonstration that was used. But excellent question.
Thank you, Brandon. All right.
All right, next we want to talk about the front windshield. The front windshield is laminated safety glass to prevent your head from going through the window. It's laminated on the inside of the vehicle, on the outside, the glass is between that. So Chief Becker is going to demonstrate using what's called the windshield saw. There's various options out there. This is just one brand. We can also utilize, which Chief Becker will demonstrate on the other side of the vehicle, using a firefighter flathead axe. Now, some people will say, can't I use a sawzall? There are several devices out there. Remember, the goal is to remove the windshield. So Chief Becker will go ahead and he's going to start. He's going to reach it first. As far as he can, he's going to strike the windshield on the top side. As he makes the initial purchase, now he will utilize the saw blade and bring it towards him. Keep in mind, if you go too high, you will have the visor interfering with your blade. If you notice all the glass dust that's coming about as he's cutting, this is why we will use a disposable blanket or extrication blanket to cover our victim. So you see how Chief Becker has utilized the windshield saw on this side. Now I'm going to ask Chief Becker to demonstrate the flathead axe on the other side to finish the removal of the windshield. So in the chat, as Chief Beck is doing this, once we remove the windshield, where do you think it should go? If you can just chat back a couple of answers to Chief Noonan as he's monitoring this. Short strikes. Remember, there was a victim in here, so short little chops. In the axe. And so for time purposes, you get the theory behind utilizing the firefighter flathead axe. I'm just going to ask Chief Beck to finish up with the windshield saw. It comes across the top, down the other side. Now the windshield, the car windshields, modern day car windshields are glued in place. The older cars that you'll find from the 70s and 80s used to have a rubber gasket. Those, you know, are long gone. So everything's laminated in place. So what we're going to do is reach in and pull the windshield forward.
Good plan.
So you can see the windshield's been removed. I can access my patient to assist the EMS personnel inside. We could take the windshield totally off by chopping out the bottom of the windshield. So, Shannon, did we get any answers where we would take the windshield once it's removed? Where we would put it?
We had one or two people chime in and predominantly said the hood.
Okay, the hood is a good location. However, the hood, especially during the rain, snowy season, the glass could slide off. The best place to take the windshield, once it's removed, is to place it under the body of the car. Do not place it on the pavement of where you're working, especially at night, because it becomes a slip and trip fall hazard. Next thing we want to talk about is gaining access to the car. How are we going to go and gain access to the vehicle to get the patient up? Well, we have several choices. So we step over to vehicle number 2. Before we even go any further, let's talk about the parts of the car. When we talk about the car, we talk about the position of the vehicle as we are sitting in the driver's seat. So we have left side, which is the driver, right side is the passenger, unless if you happen to have a foreign car where we can have a right side driver. So traditionally, left side is always the driver, right side is the passenger. So we look at the car here, we have a 4-door car. The car has 6 sides, don't forget, just like the building. We would start off, we have the roof. We have side 1, side 2, 3, and 4 as we go around the car. Between the roof and the body of the car, every vertical column, we call them posted vehicle extrication, has an alphabet designation. Starting from the front, this would be the A post. Next back towards the rear would be the B post. And finally the C post. What happens if we happen to have a bus or a motorhome, an SUV? Anything that's vertical gets an alphabet designation. We left off with C, the next one would be D. Now, someone's gonna say, Chief, what happens if it's a train, whatever? We get to Z. It doesn't matter. Next one would be called AA, A1. What? As long as we know, as we're communicating among the rescuers, what I want the person with the cut of the cut. So we're going to demonstrate if this car is already has an opening. We want to remove this door totally. So we already have a natural opening.
Can you close the door at least? So
you not want to go ahead.
All right, but
and you think about EMS with the backboard. Would it be difficult to access the patient here straight in? We want a nice shot straight in, 180 degrees. What we don't want to do is rock the car. We do not want to take several firefighters and start doing this to the car. Because don't forget, every movement, that patient's movement, if they have a cervical injury or any type of spinal injury, it could enhance or make matters worse. So just give us 2 seconds. We're going to go ahead and start the engine up. So we're going off camera for 1 second. Let's go with spread. Up, spread. Let's go spread first. Okay, Chief Becker, it has one of our spreaders. You never want to drop yourself between the car and the tool, as Chief Becker just demonstrated for the purpose of safety. So we're utilizing, and there's several manufacturers out there we happen to be using first today. If they're a hydraulic tool, you have spreaders, cutters, and rams. So it doesn't matter what brand or manufacturer you have, all the techniques are generally the same. So the door has 2 hinges on it, a top and bottom hinge. So Chief Becker is going to start at the top. He's going to place the spreader right on top of the top hinge. And the car is chocked on the other side. That's why you don't see chocks on this side. He's going to keep going. If you notice how the top hinge has already broken away. Next is we are going to tack the bottom hinge. I will hold the door for safety purposes. We want to make sure you watch your feet. Next is we have to cut the cable, electrical cable that's in between there. Again, the battery's disconnected, so there will be no charge here. This is where a pair of good cable cutters come into play.
Chief, could you also use your hydraulic cutters for this?
Yes,
also?
we're going to demonstrate the next option is we're going to show you how to use cutters to remove the back door. So Chief Beck is going to grab the hydraulic cutter. And all he's going to do is, for convenience, is snip the wires that's still holding the door in place. They also have a piece of metal that prevents the door from opening too far. That was broken as he was spreading. Once the door is off, we want to remove it from the seam. This way we have full access to bring it back down. Now the next option, if we had hinges, if you notice we have hinges exposed right here, I can attack the hinges first. I have an option, I can cut the hinges or I can use a spreader. So we're going to go ahead and use the cutter. We're going to cut the hinges, and this is another way of removing the door. Remember, don't trap yourself between the car and the tool. You always want to be on the outside of the tool. Chief Becker is attacking the top hinge. This is one option as he goes ahead and cuts the top hinge. So if the hinges are exposed, so the top hinge has been cut. Now we're going to go ahead and show you another option utilizing the spreader. So Chief Becker has the top hinge cut. Now we're going to switch to the spreader. And much like we did on the front, the top hinge goes first. If we break that bottom hinge first, the door will have a tendency to go ahead and spring upward. And then you would have a 2 or 3 foot drop. as we're using the spreader, we want to make sure we have the inside panel of the car pressing against the outside panel. If we start ripping metal, we need to stop. We need to make sure that we're not ripping, tearing the metal. He keeps moving the tool deeper in, taking his time, make sure he doesn't rip the hinge. I should say rip the metal, or as we call it, skin the metal. Now he's attacking the bottom hinge. He's going to keep on going. Now this is normally, I'm off camera narrating this, normally when we work together, I've seen an auto accident, one of us would have the spreader and the other would have the cutter. Now the back side of the door is still attached to the native bolt. That's the mechanism that the latch goes over to secure the door from opening. So if the latch or the handle is not destroyed, sometimes we can reach in and just remove the door by using the inside handle. Chief Beckett, can you operate the inside handle by chance? So we're having some difficulty. The inside handle was destroyed during the spreading. So all we're going to do is take the cutter, and we have to know what our cutter is capable of doing. Some cutters cannot cut hardened steel. So be guided by your manufacturer's recommendations on the cutter. So I'm going off voice for a minute so we can make the scene safe as Chief Becker.
Okay, it's important to realize as all of this is going on that, you know, these are kind of unpredictable. You're not sure if the car is going to rip, where it may rip. So if something doesn't work, we need to be thinking ahead at what is my second option going to be. You see Chief Becker in there with the cutters, and look how simply that native bolt was cut. So real nice job there. I see a couple of questions. Let's just hold off on those. I will get to them, I promise. Let's just wait till we get to a little more of a quieter time.
Okay, the next thing we're going to demonstrate, what happens if you have multiple people in the car. If you notice from the initial opening scene, this is a two-car motor vehicle collision where it's a T-bone intersection. Now, we have, for demonstration purposes, multiple people in this car. So we're going to do what's called a total roof removal. We're going to remove the total roof off the car by cutting all 6 vertical posts. Before I cut any post, I want to check for airbags to make sure I'm not cutting through an airbag cylinder, which would activate the airbag. So Chief Becker is stripping the plastic, doing a visual inspection to make sure there's no airbag cylinders. Next thing we have to worry about is where do we cut? Do we cut high or do we cut low? If I cut high, then I have the possibility of having a post that's approximately 2.5, 3 feet long. It's a trip fall hazard that I can impale myself as we're trying to get the victim out. I prefer, and several other my colleagues prefer, that we cut as low as possible. So Chief Becker's going to start making the cuts. This is the A post he's cutting. We want to make sure when we're using our hydraulic cutter, we get as deep into the fulcrum or into the mouth of the cutter. We don't want to use the tips. The strength is at the base of the cutter. Next, we're going to go ahead and peel the plastic off the B post. Look for any airbags that may be there. Also, we have to worry about at the base of the B post is the seat belt for the occupants in the front seat. And we have to worry about pretensioners, whose job it is in a collision to fire a mechanism to pull you back into the seat. If we inadvertently cut through that, it will activate the pretensioner. Now Chief Becker knows where he needs to cut. We're safe to cut. We're going to cut right along the body line where the seat is. If your cutter is large enough, we may be able to get it with one cut. Otherwise, we will have to go ahead and do 2 cuts, one from either side. So as we cut, we want to keep the trigger pressed until it goes through. It's a 2-stage pump. What that means is it builds pressure as it's struggling. It will kick into the second stage. So you see how Chief Becker has gone through the one side? And I think he was able to go all the way through. And he's giving me affirmative. Now we will go back to what we call the C post. Now the C post, you notice, let's Chief Becker, let's go C post. So if you see the C post is wide. So here is our C post. Chief Becker's gonna go ahead and come across right on a diagonal, a 45 degree. He's gonna make one cut from the top, then he's gonna make one cut bottom up. As we're cutting the post, we want to take other firefighters from your engine or from your truck company, ever on scene, that's wearing PPE to support the vertical post, support the roof as we're cutting it, so it does not collapse down onto our occupants of the bar. Now we have a choice. At this point, we have the A, B, and C post cut. There's another option we could utilize. If your second car is impinging on the first car, we could actually fold this roof. We could do a flap, what they call a flap, which we will go ahead and demonstrate, and then we will continue with the total roof removal. So as Chief Becker goes to the driver's side, he's going to make a pie cut, a B cut, and then you notice a 45 one way.
Okay, so
Then he's going to flip the tool.
what's new? It's cool. It's cool. How about some 2K?
As he's making the first cut, you will angle the tool, make a second cut.
Do you know why we're cutting up a car in this?
Angle the tool to make a second
Like,
cut.
I understand that we're gonna get the people out, but I'm pretty sure cutting down one door was enough.
Like taking a piece of pie from your mother's apple pie or whoever's baking in your house. Now we're going to go ahead. If you notice the piece came out, he's going to make one additional cut to make that B into a Y, just so it assists us in flopping the roof.
So wait, is Jared awake?
Bro, mute your mic.
And now he's going to make that additional cut so the B becomes a Y.
We see Chief Becker now is going to the other side of the roof as we get Chief Simsack back with us.
We just had to go ahead and make some arrangements because it's a little noisy. We had to bring the motor inside our filming studio. So right now, Chief Becker is doing that second tie cut, and he's going to turn it into the Y like he did on the backside. Now, you will notice as we do this, there might be some senior members in your department who will remember in the old days, back when they were probies, they would do a roof flap front to back. Well, if you have to, that's another option, but you want to make sure we flop it all the way back. If you notice, unfortunately, the roof is collapsed a little bit on us because we do not have that support personnel. Now he's making the wide cut. Now we're going to go ahead and shut the motor off so it's a little quiet so we can explain our next operation.
Much better there, Chief Simsek.
Okay, so now we can go ahead and have a little conversation. So we did have multiple firefighters. Chief Beck is simulating that we have multiple firefighters that will fold the roof over. So this is done with at least 4 firefighters. So as Chief Beck pushes it over, we're just going to have to go ahead. And obviously, we could go ahead and utilize pike poles. We could use a short piece of rope, piece of webbing. We do not want this to sit like this because if it's breezy out, a windy night, air could get underneath this and it would shift. So we want to tie this back with a short piece of rope, a piece of chain or something like that. So next thing, we're going to go ahead and demonstrate the full roof removal. So we're just going to flip this back over and then cut the remaining posts.
All right. How about we take a second, Chief, after you flip that back before we start the tool? We do have a question or two in the chat, maybe while we have a nice quiet second here. Joseph asked about cutting cables. We cut the cable to the door. We said we could use a pair of pliers, cable cutters, or the hydraulic cutting tool. But he mentioned today with the advent of electric cars, how can that affect us?
Okay, the hazards of electric cars, going through the doors, the electric cars powered along the base of the vehicle, along the channel on the side of the car. The cabling that we were dealing with today, the electric car you're talking about feeds the motor or causes the car acceleration. The cables that we cut are ancillary cables, 12 volt, that is dealing with just the windows, interior lights, etc. But excellent question. And how can you identify those cables in electric vehicles? Traditionally, they are colored bright orange. However, there has been sightings of light blue, but they stand out, and there's warnings all of those cables do not cut, etc. Excellent question, thank you.
All right, I'm going to jump right into one more there, Chief. Hazardous materials or chemicals found inside the vehicle while something like this is going on. What would be our response?
So what we have to think about in regard to hazardous materials and chemicals, etc., is as we show up on the scene, we want to get that big picture. We don't want tunnel vision. We want to take in the whole scene. If this is involving trucks, remember when we talk about hazardous materials and stuff, traditionally, they have to be labeled. Trucks have to be labeled or placarded on all 4 sides. But a vehicle would not have the amount of quantity required for labeling, or I should say for placarding. But what is transported in these vehicles, in a private vehicle, that you may come across? You have cars picking up blood samples and other health samples going back to laboratories that could be on the ground when you show up. We could also have radiation. Also, now everyone's awake. I mentioned radiation, now everyone's perked up. Yes, radiation. Think about the people that are having stress tests, nuclear stress tests. that is transported by a vehicle. It doesn't matter what type. It could be a Volkswagen all the way up to, Lamborghini. It could be transporting the radioactive material. However, that is contained inside what they call a pig. And that's to protect the radiation from leaking out in case of collision. And that is labeled. That will have the traditional trifoil that you see in radiation, that black and yellow warning sign for radiation. But anything else that we come across, you never know what's in the trunk. That's why, as we complete an extrication, and sometimes we may, especially when we have up on the Northway, we got a car that runs underneath the rear tractor trailer, we're gonna have to maybe tunnel through back of the car, get to those victims, and remove them by the trunk, which is beyond the scope of what we're looking at today. But as we open up that trunk, every car accident, every car fire, the trunk should be popped. You might find a victim, God forbid, or other hazards inside that trunk.
Chief, we're gonna go one more, and just Aiden, I saw your question. I think we're gonna get to it shortly, so I didn't forget about you, but I'm gonna go to Dom real quick just because it kind of works with what we've done up to this point. If you can gain easy access, and I don't know if I'm fully understanding Dom's question, easy entry to the door, if someone is trapped, do you still need to take the door? So I kind of think it means more or less, if we can gain entry, do we still need to take that door off the way we did?
If you think about treating the patients, EMS has changed over the years. Everyone used to be on the backboard. We used to have the shortboard people. The senior members that may be watching this, you remember the days of the shortboard and backboard, or the KED, the Kenwood extrication device, where we took you out on a shortboard and put you onto a longboard. Well, medicine has advanced. EMTs have got additional training to determine, is there suspected spinal injury? When in doubt, we will backboard and place a cervical collar or extrication collar on that person. But we don't have to remove a door every time. It depends on the size of the patient. Is the patient able? When you show up at the scene, a lot of times the people are out of the car. You think about what we just did today is for a true, what we call pin job. Most of our accidents, the doors may be just shifted a little bit. We can get in there with a halogen tool, which we're going to demonstrate on the next car. But excellent question. No, we do not have to take the doors fully off every car. But once you start cutting a car with hydraulics, such as the roof, that car is total. They do not go back to the body shop and, weld it back together. So once the roof is damaged or cut by hydraulic tool, that car will be total. Good question.
All right, so I think we're gonna go ahead and take the rest of the roof off, Chief.
Yes, we will. Stand by.
All right, gonna start that generator up again. Take a look, we still have the A, B, and C posts on our driver's side that now have to be cut. Chief Becker checking for airbags.
Notice how I'm not expelling any energy. The tool is set. All I'm operating now is the handle. Right? Take this time. These tools are heavy. Take this time to take a breath and get yourself refreshed. No effort whatsoever. Let the tool do the work. Another quick thing to remember, we talk about resetting the tools to a position of function. All right? As soon as you're done, if you're on the cutter, you're the firefighter operating the cutter. As soon as you get done, get into a position of function to be ready to cut.
Coming to you, Chief, coming to you.
Look, Mom, no hands.
Chief's gonna make his way around to the far side of the car. I'm gonna walk around myself, going the other direction. Remember that seat post was larger here. So if we can't take it in the one cut, we get as deep as we can on that first cut. then we will come in from the other direction for the second cut. Notice how that tool even moves a little bit while the cutting is going on. In most cases, if you can, you just kind of let it take the direction or path that it chooses.
It brings up a good point about the tool moving. All right, these tools have tremendous amounts, upwards of over 100,000 pounds of cutting force, drying force. So when that tool starts to move, what you need to be aware of is where your hand is, that your hand doesn't come in contact with the vehicle.
All right, we would have multiple firefighters removing the roof together. See if our two chiefs can handle this safely. Obviously, patient safety is of the utmost importance.
All right, back to quiet time. So if you notice, we have full access now to our multiple victims in the car. If they all had to be backboarded, we can put backboards. We didn't have to take the doors off, by the way. If I wanted to do a total roof removal, I could do that without taking the doors off. And this way I can just put backboards behind drivers and rear seat passengers. Any questions up to this point as we reposition tools?
Now, I've got one more question, Chief, and it might kind of work in with where we're going, but Aiden had asked, what happens if someone has a limb crushed by the door or maybe by, he didn't specifically mention, but I'll throw in maybe the dashboard or something like that?
Excellent question. And again, every accident scene is different. Over the years, myself, Chief Becker, we have dealt with cars that you couldn't even recognize, and we had multiple people inside. Unfortunately, some were fatalities, but even with the fatalities, eventually, everyone has to come out of the car. Just like in a house fire, every victim is removed. So you're gonna have to work around people that are impaled by the dashboard, maybe the steering wheel. You are like a surgeon in the field with the extrication tools. People are gonna be screaming in pain, and this is where our medics can play a role. Depending on the patient's condition, if you do have paramedics on the scene, they may be able to start IVs and do some type of pain management. There may be times where you may have, and that doesn't occur that often, but you may actually have to have a trauma doc come out to the scene and do an amputation at the scene. Few and far between, very rare, but that is the ultimate option if you had to.
All right, so what do we got next there, Chief?
Okay, next we're gonna go ahead and we switch over to vehicle number 2. We're gonna continue making the glass safe, and we're gonna do what's called initial purchase. We're gonna show you with the Halligan tool, because this vehicle number 2, as we shift camera positions, you'll see there is no natural openings. Where do we start on the door removal if there's no natural openings? You have your choice. Depends on, or you have a passenger in the front seat, you have occupants in the back, or we have an option. We're going to demonstrate what's called a total door removal here. So total door removal is we're taking off both the front door and the rear door at the same time. Now, keep in mind, as we talk about our vertical post and everything, if you happen to have a sawzall in your department, A sawzall will cut just as quick. A hacksaw, some of you may have hacksaws, and again, we have attendees from multiple fire departments throughout the state. So you might not have hydraulic equipment. You might have a sawzall. I have a sawzall with a come along, or you might just have a hacksaw. So a hacksaw, what you can do, think about which way does a hacksaw cut. Depends on who put the blade on it. But if I take a hacksaw and put two blades on them in opposite directions, I'm getting twice the cut, you know, on a forward and a return stroke. So first thing we want to do is continue making the glass safe. So we're going to go ahead and utilize a Halligan tool this time. I have Chief Becker, he was getting a window punch. I always got to keep him on his toes. So what we can do, we can take the adze in, we can attempt to put the adze into the windshield, correction, the side window, get it deep down, and then we can attempt to pry up to break the window. If you notice, he did not take the Halligan tool, Paul Bunyan style, and smash it through. And next thing you know, the point of the Halligan is injuring your victim. We do want to clear out the opening.
Chief, while he's opening up that window there, what if you had a sliding door? I'm thinking like the minivan type.
So the sliding door works in two mechanisms. The first is the door has to be popped open and then slid along its track. Same techniques are utilized when you have to make a purchase point. It still locks in. The door initially locks in onto that native bolt that we talked about. So it's just a little variation, but same techniques. So now Chief Becker's going to take the Halligan tool. We're going to try to make a purchase right here to expose the native bolt.
See the Chief using the striking side of our flathead axe, driving the adze of the Halligan in. Kind of pushing down and pushing up. Chief mentioned that purchase point, just looking for an opening. Create more space.
So what we're trying to do is expose the native bolt right there. So that's one way of doing it with the balancing tool. But there's also another way. We can take our spreader. We're going to start up the motor again. We can push it outside. Hopefully it's a little bit quieter. So Chief Becker.
All right, we're just going to get set. If everyone gives us a quick second. I'm going to close the bay door behind us to try and give us a little bit more ability to hear the directions of our Chief. I think that's going to be a little bit better for us.
Okay, so Chief Becker can go ahead and attempt to widen that opening by using the tips of the hydraulic tool and bending it back to expose that native bolt. Or Chief Becker can go from the door ledge to the roof line to try to push the door down. So we are dealing with a satin core, and the satin is not a metal core, so there's a lot of give on it because of the construction of composite material. So here, where you're not going to be able to do a lot of spreading, you're going to utilize your cutter most of the time. Again, the inside panel to the outside panel. If you notice, because we did get a good bite, and if you have a good bite, you keep on going, you keep spreading. Once you rip material, that's when you stop and reposition. So Chief Becker has the door off here. So we're going to go ahead and shut the door. We're going to close the door up, show you another technique. So if that door was fully closed, which is not, you can go ahead, open up your spreading device and place it straight down over the door. Or another technique is squeezing a fender, which Chief Beck is going to demonstrate here to expose the hinge side. If you notice the fender here, the front fender is being pulled towards the front. Again, this is a composite car. So now the techniques we are going to have to vary. So he's going to drop the tool down towards the front and do top to bottom. As I said, every accident seems different. You have to modify, adapt, and overcome. You cannot give up. People's lives depend on you. If you notice how the front is coming apart, the back side, if the NATO latch is still locked, that would be our opening. So all we're going to do is finish this up with a cutter. Keep back a cutter, just cut the front.
Sneak in there, Chief. There we go. All right.
When you're working inside the car like this is where you have to be careful of where your hand is. What I'm going to try to do now is make my cut on the bottom hinge and capture that electric line. They do it all at once and save some time. Notice how close my hand got to coming in contact.
Let's go ahead and show them. So we're just changing this up. We're going to try to take both doors at the same time for you. But I want to show you how to expose that native bolt on the back side. On the first car, we attacked the hinge side. On this one, we're going to go ahead. You got to take out the glass.
Chief, I had a question from Zach. When would you use a ram as opposed to the spreaders?
Zach, good question. A lot of departments, Rams, myself and Chief Becker worked together for years in our previous careers. Most of the time, we did everything with a cutter and spreader. The Rams are considered an advanced technique, and you would normally see that if you had to move a dashboard, if the person's legs were trapped underneath the dashboard. I'll get back to that in a second when we get some quiet time. But right now, Chief Becker is attacking the hinge, the left side of the rear door. He's forcing, if you notice, how we're trying to expose that native bolt.
Notice how that car is kind of cracking apart, Chief. You mentioned the composite material of construction. It just kind of snapping like plastic.
Yep, this is a Saturn, and a lot of other cars are starting to use composite materials. The first car with composite material would go all the way back to the original Stingray and Corvette was the first one with composite material. Then a little bit of history, then there was the Fiero that came out with the next composite car, followed up by Saturn vehicles. So Chief Becker is working his way towards the native bolt. Again, with the composite material, you can see that it's ripping and tearing. So if this continued on, if this was in the field, what I would just do, I would switch over to the hinge side and just cut hinges, which I'm gonna have Chief Becker do in 2 seconds. Chief Becker, we're gonna switch over to the hinge side. Just use the spreader on the hinge side so we can get a good picture of that. If you notice, tool management, the hoses, we don't want to make sure we don't step over. Chief Becker's making clearing away here. And if we're struggling, we're just gonna switch to the cutter. Like I said, cutters, you know, on composite cars. Chief Becker, let's just use the cutter. So there are many tools in our toolbox, and that's why we're switching over to the cutter, to make our life a little bit easier. And so we can keep on going. So again, we always start with the top hinge. As he cuts the top hinge, now we're gonna go switch to the bottom hinge.
You have wires again. I'm going to try to get them all.
He's gonna go ahead and try snip the wire and the hinge at the same time. He's gonna try cut both. He has them both into the cutter blades.
Notice that loud pop a lot of times when you cut those hinges. That'll be a sign to you that you've made it through. They're very strong. All right, so the only thing left now is the native bolt on this back door. Chief's going to assist, just holding the door. You don't want it to come flying off and potentially hurt someone, especially us as we're operating on the scene. Safety still needs to be the primary component, as we see right there. Right, that door popped right off, that native bolt let go. But we were able to keep everyone safe. All right, I think we're going to shut down our compressor. But what we've done here is given ourselves access to both the front and rear of the passenger side of the vehicle here.
Okay, back to some quiet time. So what we wanted to demonstrate was a full body door removal, taking the front and back doors at the same time. Unfortunately, our Saturn didn't want to cooperate with us, but that's what happens when you do everything live. You know, there's no retakes when you're doing a live episode. So first thing we did was take the front hinges. Then we would cut or removed the back door from the native bolt. So hinge, native, cut, we cut the top of the B post. I would put my spreader device in here and bend the B post out of the way. And then I would cut the bottom of the B post once the doors and everything folded over. And then I would take off both doors at the same time, giving us full access in case we have someone that went from the front to the back in between the gap. That's what we can do.
All right, Chief, we had a quick question. We'll kind of take a quick peek at. What if we had an overturned vehicle with victims entrapped?
Overturned vehicles on the side, techniques are the same. What we have to remember is cribbing. Cribbing is essential. When we talk about cribbing, anytime we cut something and remove something, the car itself is going to switch or rotate the dynamics of how the car is. So if this car is turtled upside down, as you're referring to, I have to support the body of the car. So I would have to build up cribbing on the hood side and the trunk side. And once I did that, that would be 4 points of cribbing. I can go ahead and cut the total roof removal and slide the roof out. So it's a technique that's been done before, but you think about how are the people suspended? Are they in seatbelts? Just because the car's overturned, we might not have to go through all this. They may be able to self-extricate. If you take out the glass, you take out the windshield, car's on its side, the car's on its side, you need to stabilize the vehicle. We do not want people climbing on top of a car that's on its side because of the possibility that vehicle will shift either one way or the other. Can accomplish using that with ropes, chains, or I know some of you going to cringe. I've used police cars in the past, to stabilize the vehicle so it wouldn't move. And I've used the fire truck too, just butt up the fire truck against it. Yes, it's gonna maybe get scratched, but remember, they're fire trucks, they're not parade pieces. Any questions from the chat room? Chief Becker, why don't you come?
All right, Chief, you have anything to sum up with?
I just wanted to thank the organizers that inviting us here. I want to thank each and every one of you that are live with us today. Your enthusiasm for learning and the fire service is overwhelming. I would say don't stop there. Keep learning. I have 43 years in the fire service, and I am learning every day. Once you think that you know everything, you're only a danger to yourself and the others on the fire ground. All right. The questions about an overturned car is more of an advanced technique. Luckily for us in today's times, we have the internet. Whoever's question that was, or everybody, that could be your homework. Explore stabilizing an upside down vehicle, a vehicle on its roof. All right. It's more of an advanced technique. Way too much to get into, but you can learn it all about it on the internet, and hopefully maybe one day with your department, you can participate in a drill where they're using their stabilization struts and cribbing to stabilize an overturned vehicle. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you learned something. I hope it was as enjoyable for you being on the other side of this camera as it was for me being here. Thank you very much.
Let's
Chief,
thank
any
Chief.
questions on, the checkbook?
Nope, that's it there, Chief
All right.
Simsack.
My
So
final thought, much like, on some TV show you might watch, fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
All
Thank
right.
you for your time.
I want to thank Chief Simsack and Chief Becker for all their knowledge and spending a little time with us. And one last word from our organizer here, Mr. Jerry Presta.
Okay, juniors, New York State, thank you very much for participating. Thank you very much for the Nassau County Fire Service Academy and the Chiefs for setting this up. Mostly thank you, FASNY, and yourselves for participating. Now, February 10th, 7 p.m., it's a Wednesday night. We're going to have the house over here, emergency procedures, wall breaching, emergency bailout, search. So please join us. Tell your other juniors that could not possibly join you today to watch this. Tell them to check in February, and then we'll have another one in March as well. The more people that participate, the more that FASNY and Fire Service Academy is going to do for our juniors. Stay safe. See you next month.
Thanks, Jerry, and thank you, everybody, for participating. We look forward to seeing you next month.